So karma, to me, seems to be, in a political science term, to be treated as a citizen, with not only social and economic rights, but also rights to be treated as a citizen with respect. Let me take the second one, adil. This is more difficult, justice. I think no one can avoid the Islamic or Islamist connotations here. Think, for example, I think you know that, of the book which is present in so many homes all over the Arab world, which is called Al-Adala al-Ijtimaiya fil Islam by the Egyptian Said Qutb. But also in mainstream political science, the term justice is contested and difficult. We have research trying to see how people in different countries define what they mean by justice. Of course, the context here could be the same as when I was talking about karma, but I would like to say something more about the economy. In a country like Algeria, I'm using it, it's extreme, but it is also quite resembling the other North African countries, as also Syria, for example, or Iraq under the Ba'ath Party. In Algeria, the wage spread in the 1960s and 70s was 1 to 4. There were lots of people without a wage, but if you had to work, a minister at the time earned only 4 times what an industrial worker earned. From the late 1980s and onwards, even more so in the 90s, after, you know, the first Gulf War and the fall of the wall, etc. And even so in the new century, the economic liberalization has been the main gathering claim of all authorities, international and national, all over the place. This means privatization of former state-owned enterprises, foreign direct investment, dismantling of external custom protection, and generally, this also was mentioned yesterday, dismantling of social subventions on, for example, food, which there were in all those countries, although they did not have a war like in the case of Iran, but they were subsidizing, sugar, coffee, yeah, whatever basic things people need. This liberalization meant that there was, in a country like Tunisia, that there came strong economic growth in the coastal regions and an economic abandon of the whole interior of the country. It also meant, as in the former Soviet republics and Eastern Europe, huge economic opportunities for people with the right connections in the state apparatuses and with the right connections abroad, and development of a new class of private businessmen. Income spread increased, class division deepened. And these, of course, were not supposed to be there, neither in the Egyptian or Libyan revolutionary model, nor in the Algerian or Tunisian socialist ones, or for that sake, the Syrian, or even, the Syrian Ba'athist one. By the way, this large economic and social transformation has, of course, provoked uproar before the Arab Spring. So in 2008, we had an uproar in southern Tunisia that lasted for a month. We had the textile factories in strike outside of Cairo and Mahal al-Kubra in 2004, 2006, 2008, and so on. But when regimes or a political order, if we now understand Nizam more broadly, as I think it should be, when there is a political order that for its legitimacy has to refer back to a founding moment. In Iran, the founding moment is the revolution. In those countries, Arab countries, it was either the revolution, as in the case of Egypt or Libya, or the war for independence, or something like that. When they have to refer back to that, to keep their legitimacy, they are the heritors of this founding movement, and their practice depart from the basic understanding of what this founding movement was about, then people begin to think that this is not a just society. This is not the society that they consider a good society and the one that they were promised. And this independently of how each person understands the concept of adla, what that would be. And finally, Julia, and I am shortly finished. What is freedom? You might know that the name of the Berbers, who are an important minority in Morocco, Algeria, and who also live to some extent in Egypt and Tunisia, they call themselves the Imazighen. Imazighen is their language, and it's supposed to mean the free men, or perhaps the free and noble men, as they themselves in the past had servants who were not free. Then freedom is perhaps not to pay taxes and not to be ruled by anyone as they might have claimed, for example. Or is freedom to declare yourself as part of radical feminism, as the young Amina in Tunisia, you might have heard about her. She's part of the Femen movement, and there is a trial against her just now. Or is freedom to be able to travel without a permit from the state or from your husband? Or to move around as you like, to do what you want and to say what you want? The central issue, it seems to me, is that in this region we have several states of the peculiar kind that we call rentier states. You know that this concept was coined in the early 1970s by an economist, either Iranian or of Iranian origin. His name was Hossein Madawi. And this concept has been overtaken and developed by others. Unless you are under international sanctions, a rentier state implies that we have a state with incomes generated generally on the international market and given to the state in its capacity of having territorial control over the places where, here we are talking about oil and gas, is produced. And this is what we call the rent. It might mean a state that even without taxing its population disposes of impressive currency reserves. Both Algeria and Libya at the beginning of the Arab Spring had around $100 billion in currency reserve, which also made it possible for Algeria to launch very large reform programs and to keep the subsidies and increase them and so on. It means that people can be bought off. Their silence can be bought. We also have the great programs in Saudi Arabia, very early during the Arab Spring. 30 billion new reforms, support for different groups in population. And we even had the former ruler in Libya proposing that all this money should be divided equally among all the Libyans. But this rent, these huge incomes, also means, of course, that the claims for freedom can be efficiently repressed, at least in the short run. This can be done in different ways, as when Saudi Arabia, at the demands of the Bahraini government and within the Gulf Cooperation Council's jurisdiction, although being under an American military umbrella, had no problems whatsoever to find the troops and the police to send into Bahrain in March 2011. Or when Gaddafi sent his aviation, or when the military escalation took place in Algeria in the 1990s, or a much more efficient and less costly strategy was applied in the same country in January 2011, stopping demonstrations without killing people, but that demands lots of people, lots of training, lots of organization, so it's also costly. So let me summarize the sketchy context I have given you when trying to establish what some of the central values of these social movements refer to in terms of changing societies, changing populations, and globalized, though profoundly patriotic, new young generation. To the difference with Iran, the countries in Northern Africa and the Middle East have been directly under colonial rule. This means something for the conditions for social cohesion, independence, development, socialism, but also for the post-colonial development of the security apparatuses, because they were continuing to some extent the colonial trend. Already during colonialism, the security apparatuses in the Arab countries were quite impressive. Secondly, and here the resemblance with Iran is strong, the character of the demographic transition, the rapid urbanization, plus the successful development of the system of education, ends up in an impressive number of educated young grown up with few possibilities to social mobility upwards, as the shrinking state apparatus is already filled, and as employment in the new business sectors depends on your family connections, if you have your education from an American university or other distinctions that most people don't have. Further, there needs to be made a distinction between rentier and non-rentier states. While it would seem that the field for freedom should be larger in the rentier state, the reverse is perhaps the truth. Finally, these countries are, of course, all included in global processes. Hence, there is both political and economic pressure towards liberalization. This also means in today's world that there should be held elections regularly, which was the case in most of the countries in the 1990s and up to the Arab Spring. It also means that local and regional political institutions should be developed. This is decentralization. And that too much military involvement in politics might be to your disadvantage if you approach the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank or the European Union or whoever. All these processes that were already underway were mostly under Arab Spring. How they will unfold will be different in the different countries. And it could, of course, be reversed in case of deepening and extension of the armed confrontations, which, as you know, are taking place both in the eastern and the western part of this region. And I do think that I even did not use the word religion once. But I'm ready to discuss those issues, of course.
Thank you very much, Professor Brandl. It was very interesting exposing lecture. And we invite Mr. Henderson and his talk.